Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Neena Speer, who is an attorney, author, speaker, and truth dealer. Neena, welcome to the program.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Now, I have to tell you, I love these introductions with company names or these monikers like you have here. And I've got to tell you that some people might go, hold up, attorney and truth dealer? Are these things the same? So I'm excited to talk to you and learn about the kind of truth that you deal in. And I just love your whole brand and everything that you do. So let's just get right into learning more about Neena Speer. What was your inspiration back in the day when you made the decision to actually become a lawyer?
So back when I was deciding to become a lawyer, I was literally in car with my mom on the way to school, 8th grade, and I saw some kids getting bused to a different school than me, and they were right across the street from my middle school. And I remembered asking my mom, hey, why do those kids have to go to another school? Why can't they come to our school? And my mom said, it's just how the lines are drawn. And for me, that just frustrated me because I was like, why would someone have to go somewhere different for school, a different school than mine, because my school is a well-funded school and that school wasn't as well-funded. So I didn't understand. And it took a very long time for me to realize that it was rules and regulations and laws that restricted people from being able to attend or have the same opportunities that I had. And that frustrated me as a kid. But I was, on my way to 8th grade, I didn't know how to formulate exactly why I was so angry, but I just didn't like it. And by the time I got to college, I could formulate it. And I realized that it was being frustrated with the rules that didn't make sense and wanting to change it.
And it's interesting and to me encouraging that you didn't take that feeling and just go, let's go buck against the system and be that rebel. You took that feeling and said, how could I be productive with it? Well, let's learn the law, become an attorney, and then what can I do with that?
Yep, that was the goal because Mom taught us early on that there is a grievance process. And if you didn't learn the grievance chain of command, then you were going to have a lot of difficulties later on making it in business. So I learned that sometimes the people who rebel the quietest actually get more done because they go up the proper chain of command. They complain to the supervisor, they complain to the manager, they complain all the way up until they get to the CEO. And by that time, nobody has done anything, and so the CEO has to act. And that's the way and the path in which you can be successful when you are making grievances. There's just a different strategy. You can totally, make sure that you do a strike and you stand outside and it works. But sometimes it also works to do the background advocacy as well, and it will also get things done.
Yes, I love it. So between 8th grade and becoming an attorney, there were a few years in between there. Can you think of the kind of person you were before you became a lawyer? You mentioned you noticed this about the school districts and the lines. What other traits did you notice about yourself before you became an attorney? And maybe those were things that you felt like those would be strong suits for you.
So everyone likes to think that it's because you like to argue that you should go into law. I think that's a misnomer because honestly, I don't do a lot of arguing. I do a lot of civil, candid conversation and reasoning. And I do a lot of reading and a lot of understanding what the person wants. And so what I told one of my first bosses when I got to my 1L first internship ever was that I worked as a summer camp counselor at the Shays Valley YMCA in my hometown. And I had the divine pleasure of connecting with every single parent of a child. And what I did was I formulated a relationship. I made a connection with them. And that's what being a lawyer is. It's about creating a connection with your client. It's not about just being someone who takes their money. You form a connection, you form a bond, you form what I like to see is a relationship. in the long term, because you are the person that they go to with their most trusted, most difficult, most concerning information. And if they don't feel safe enough to tell you the truth, then you're going to end up looking bad in court. And so what I told them was I have made it a mission in my life to make connections with people. And that is what I would bring to your job, your opportunity. And that's really what I boil down to is I'm a master connector. You know, I took a Gallup strength survey, so I know all my different 5 strengths, but one was winning others over. And, you know, people like to think of that as a people pleaser, and that can be a bad thing. But what I do is I actually forge meaningful connections with people. I ask questions. I remember that thing you told me last week that you said you were going to do and asked you if it mattered the next time. And that's the type of person I was. And when I sought out jobs, I looked for opportunities for me to serve and be in those roles. And I had goals of just, you know, being, you know, everyone has that goal of being a straight A student, doing well. But I had goals for myself that, you know, even if I didn't hit it out of the park, I was going to work my hardest to get it back up to the top level. And the problems that I definitely faced trying to get there was getting out of my own head of trying to please everyone. That was a very difficult process, and that led to a lot of difficulty later on because I wanted everybody to like me. And it took a while for me to break that and realize that I had to like myself in order for me to get to where I needed to go in life.
You know, that's just a personal development maxim that you just laid out, you know, getting to like yourself and who cares. You know, I work from acceptance, not for acceptance, right? I accept myself. Mm-hmm. And secondly, the other thing about being that master connector, boy, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about being a lawyer or being a salesperson or being anything, entrepreneur. Being that master connector and getting to know people and developing relationship, that's a trait and a skill and a mindset that is so important in business today.
Yes. And I mean, a lot of people, as one of my professors said, you have things that we can't teach you. And I would love to be able to teach my students that, but I can't. And even though that professor might not have meant it in the best way because I didn't have all the academic smarts in law school, I kind of struggled on through that. But what they said was that the skills that I have, my soft skills, are very high level. And for me, that was enough. You know, the fact that I have high soft skills, which means that I'm a caring individual. I care about the people that I work with. I care about the stuff that I do. I put my heart into it. That means more to me than being the book smart right away on the first day or the first year I've ever gone to law school with nobody in my family to kind of guide me through it. So for me, telling me I have the soft skills that's necessary for this field is like the hugest compliment ever.
Yeah.
Because I can learn the data.
I can learn the other stuff.
Yeah, what you can't do is learn how to be a decent human being if you've never tried. And that's the issue. A lot of people have never tried. They've never had to fix themselves because I watched a show the other day. I don't know if you heard of something called The Good Wife, but one of the characters in it said, you know, I'm rich. I don't have to be nice. And I don't think that that's true. You know, being rich can be measured by the quality and the caliber of the person. And so I believe that I am rich in the fact that the caliber that I bring to the table is that I try, if I can, to be the type of person that I would want to be around in the long run.
100%. So let's think back about some early lessons that you learned, even through law school. Can you think of a lesson that you learned then that impacts you still even today in your business?
Yes. So one mistake I made when I started this entrepreneur journey, I called myself an entrepreneur by accident because, you know, I thought that being someone who comes up with, you know, an idea like writing a book, that makes me an entrepreneur. But I realized that entrepreneurship is about creating something new that's never been in the market before. So just book writing isn't enough. You know, you have to redevelop the whole book marketing scheme in order to get to that qualification. And I learned that in an accelerator course called the Black Upstart. And I got into that after I failed my bar exam. That's my wonderful mistake that I like to say led me to my biggest blessings. But I tried to go there and redevelop my nonprofit and get my nonprofit funded and off the ground and thought that was entrepreneurship. And they quickly told me entrepreneurship is about creating something that's meeting a market need and it's missing from the market. And when I learned that little bit of information, all of the firing systems that could go off in my head went off. I said, oh my gosh, I've been doing it wrong. I've been telling people I'm an entrepreneur and I'm not. And I hate not being precise with my words. So I learned that day about entrepreneurship and making sure that I use words that are precise. And then I realized I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So by the end of that accelerator program, because my idea was rejected, and we only had 3 days to come up with it. So in less than 24 hours, I came up with an entrepreneurial venture. It was a social good venture, and I was able to present it in front of investors who said that they would like to see it on the shelf the next day. And I came up with that in less than 24 hours because I had to completely rethink what entrepreneurship was.
Excellent. So that's a huge lesson. And I think that we don't have the time for it at this moment, but I'm sure that you could come up with 5, 10, 15, 20 ways that lesson has been implemented in your life in the years since, and also in your clients' lives. So I just love that lesson, because a lot of people think on the surface that one thing, like the word entrepreneurship or another thing, here's what it means, but when you dig in or when you see what it really means, wow, it's totally different. And now I'm clarified in my vision. I can now move forward. So let's now shift gears and think about a failure. Has there been a failure in your past? You mentioned failing the bar. What did that do to contribute to the success that you have today?
So I like to think of it like this. If I didn't fail the bar, God might not have used my story to inspire for me. And so I like to think of everything as purposeful, because when I first took the bar exam, I was trying to hit it out of the park. My motives were kind of all the way off. I wanted to get the highest score possible, wanted to pass in all the jurisdictions. When I went to go take the bar a second time, the one thing I told God, I said, God, look, if you just give me the exact score I need to pass, I'll be happy. And you know what happened? He gave me a little bit less than the score I needed to pass, and they rounded up just to show me that he was God. And that was something different, better, even a stronger person, because I realized that when it is your time, it's your time. But your motives, you have to check your motives. And one of my mentors says this a lot, and I have tried to do that a lot in my life, is to check your motives for doing things. Because when your motives are bad motives, you will notice that sometimes the things that you want to work out don't work out. Now, a lot of people will say, well, Neena, some people get things and their motives are all bad, but that doesn't mean they'll get them for the long term. You just see what's happening now, not for the future. And for me, I learned that I was in the perfect positioning, because when I failed that bar exam, I jumped into that accelerator program, learned about Black entrepreneurship, met with key investors, made long-term connections, and was able to build my business with business entrepreneurship once I started my law firm in 2018. So that was intentional. God did that on purpose. I don't believe that there was an accident, and that had I not failed, I would have gone straight into working for somebody else, and I would have never thought to start my own business.
That's huge. And, that's a really advanced mindset that a lot of people don't have. They just look at that initial failure and then take it on themselves. Oh, it must mean I'm a failure, so I'm done. So you looked at it and said, how can I be better? And let's go back and look at what's the better way to look at that. So that's just so huge. When you mentioned about a movie a little bit ago, it reminds me of like these, young Sheldon or young Rock, or, what would you, Neena, say to young Neena if you could go back and give yourself a little piece of advice back in the early days based on what you know right now?
Man, I would tell her to stop thinking everything's got to be done by herself. I did it all on my own, and that self-made logic and framework is just silly. When there's people like you, Mike, and other people like myself now, for other people that can do it for you and can help you, so that it's not alone. It's not a lonely process. And I always thought, because I have to own everything and I'm an IP lawyer, so, what you create is very important. But I always thought I had to do it myself because I didn't trust anybody. And a lot of people feel like that in business. But that's something that I really wish I had worked on more early on, so I would feel more inclusive or included in this process with other people, and that they felt the same way with me. Because it took a while for me to trust anybody in business, because there's a lot of scams out there.
Yep.
But you don't have to loan. And sometimes you pay a little bit more for the better quality product versus the cheaper product that might not be the best quality. And so that was one thing that I learned, that if I would just stop trying to do it alone or trying to take the cheap way out, that I would find a lot more success in my business.
And it also keeps you focused on what you do best. So if you try to do something on your own, might not be your wheelhouse. So if you allow someone to come alongside you to help you out with that, now your focus is right laser targeted on your skill set. So I think that's another really big piece of the equation.
It really is. I mean,
so from these lessons and failures that you've learned through the years, certainly there's a lot more lessons that you'll learn, because it's always the mindset of constant, never-ending improvement, just always fine-tuning. But talk a little bit now about the businesswoman you've become today from learning from these lessons.
Mm-hmm. So funny enough, I use this phrase a lot. It's called Neena the Last Brand. So it sums up a lot of what I do into three, good places. So it's lawyer, author, speaker, truth. That's what it stands for. And that came to me in the middle of the night one night because I wanted to redefine last place. And a lot of my businesses I created when I thought I was in last place. Like I thought, I was about to flunk out of law school. I had some very difficult times with getting through the bar exam, but I created those in middle of last place mentality, and I wanted to redefine that word. And so I first started with step 1, 2, 3. That was the idea I came up with when I was 8, and I picked up enough contacts by the time I was 23 to get a people together and say, hey, let's do a nonprofit mentoring organization that's continuous, long-term. And everyone said, yeah, let's do it. And we've been in practice for about 5 years and have been able to grow it exponentially. So that nonprofit was my first baby brainchild. And then after I passed the bar, I knew I needed to create something for my book brand, and I needed to create a law firm itself in order for me to be able to sell my books for one, and then for me to sell my legal services for the other. Those businesses, it took years to build. Like my law firm, my first year, I made $80. And then the next year, I was able to grow myself to 5 figures. And then now I'm almost out of the 5-figure land. I might get close to 6 figures one day, but right now I'm just trying to get myself out of the low 5 figures to the high 5 figures. Yep. But my goal was always to build the business, and it took 2 years to build the law firm to a point where I don't even go out for business anymore. They come to me. They see my Instagram or someone tells them about me. So the type of people I'm trying to help, I've always made this a big thing, and people might get on my case about it, but I focus on minority business owners and minority people, and my books all focus on minority women because there's not a lot of books catered specifically to us. But this field is hard. A lot of people kind of look at us in a way in which that if they're too assertive, then we are the B word, and I don't like that. So I wanted to show a woman that could be a powerhouse, but also could be an effective, caring, meaningful leader that also has love in their life. And it might not be a relationship, but the love is that they love their business, they love what they do, they love what they're doing for people. And that's the problem. Most of the times we do things, we take on jobs to pay the bills. And I don't want people to have that problem anymore. I want them to get to a point where they feel empowered to take on their own financial freedom and things like that. And I don't think that a lot of us feel that way because we've been told our whole lives that getting a job is more important than us creating our own, because creating your own is too risky.
That's a big aha, I think, for a lot of people. And in the last, decade or two, it's been so much easier for anyone to start that entrepreneurial venture, because it used to be quit your job and have hundreds of thousands of dollars to invest in a business or whatever the case is. And now it doesn't take much to have an idea and get going as a side hustle until it grows. So let's talk a little bit about your work with entrepreneurs. And I love female entrepreneur, female minority entrepreneur focus, because if there is a market that you can serve and get really specific about, they just really can gravitate to you. So when you're working with an entrepreneur who's got really like millionaire potential, number one, they need to realize they've got millionaire potential, but you're working with them to kind of guide them on every step of the way. There's a lot of things that will come up. So I want to go through a few questions that I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs would have. So the first question would be, should I protect my business name and my logo with a trademark?
Yes. So, yes, absolutely. But yes, also you should do it with some strategy to it, right? Because a lot of people come to me with their names already pre-built, and they haven't done the research necessary to make sure that their name has a strong capability for a trademark application. Because there are some names that are so common that you're probably going to get an office action. And the goal of filing for a trademark is to always make sure that you're going towards acceptance, because otherwise you just wasted money because they didn't give you a refund if you have a failed application. It's just gone. And so the goal is to have a strong name at the onset so you actually have a chance for success. So I always tell my business owners that they should trademark their business name, brainstorm with people. A lot of trademark attorneys, including myself, offer a brainstorming session for you to brainstorm a business name that has stronger potential than the one that you may have now. Some people are so set in their names that they don't do that, but that's really important because at that stage you can check it on the SOS website and you can check it on the USPTO register to see whether or not it has strength. Just at the very onset, a quick general search is really important, because sometimes when I do a general search, I find out there's like 100 people with that name and only one person was allowed to register and the rest of them were given office action. And that's crazy, because if you look at that on a brainstorm session, you can save yourself a lot of headache from finding out later on that you got to cease and desist. And then they form their business, and then they get those things. But a lot of people, they don't have their trademarked business name and logo because they don't own their logo, right?
Yeah.
Because they had someone create the logo, and they never got the rights to their logo. And when they go trademark it or copyright it, they can't, because they just paid somebody money. They didn't sign a contract, because people who are graphic designers, they don't have an incentive to give you a contract when it's $60, right? But if you're paying them $300, yeah, I'm going to give you a contract. But a lot of people look for those $60 deals on Facebook. I have fallen privy to it, so I know. But you have to get it in writing, and a lot of people don't. And that's the hard part, is we look for the cheap without the proper paperwork. Without paperwork, you don't know what the terms are.
Yep. Don't go cheap and fast and easy. Do the work up front and lay that foundation. And then when you're ready to take that step forward, then it's moving forward with purpose. So that's a really, really great piece. And I feel like a lot of people get confused between trademark and copyright. So what about entrepreneurs that might ask, should I protect my brand with a copyright?
So a lot of people do get confused, and that's just because a copyright is a fixed work and a trademark is more so for the actual name or the slogan or the logo. And a lot of people, you can do a copyright with a logo, but it's more effective to do it with a trademark, because a trademark prevents confusing similarity, and a copyright only prevents exact copying. So a lot of people get confused there, because they're like, oh, can you copyright it? And it's cheaper to copyright, but it doesn't make it more protected. Trademark is the best protection for your logo or your name that you don't want anybody to copy. A lot of people come to me with books that they've written, and you can only trademark a book series once you've made 2 or more books. And that's why I like this book series. It's a 3-book series, so that I can trademark the entire book series and not just one book at a time. So if you do a one book at a time thing, then that's going through copyright, and you copyright that book. And then the other thing that might really help illustrate this is if you go and you give a presentation to someone, you copyright those materials before you go give the presentation to anybody, and that will protect you. But you don't copyright the presentation. I mean, you don't trademark the presentation, because that's not what you're doing. You would trademark the presentation's name. So, for example, if I created something saying Neena Speer Trademark Camp, I would go trademark Neena Speer Trademark Camp, and then the presentation that goes along with that would be copyrighted. So a lot of people don't understand that it's fixed forms versus names that you're known by in the market, because how you're known in the market, there are words and phrases and symbols, and they identify your source. And the copyright identifies what the product is that you create. So that's a good way to distinguish the two. Is one is the fixed form you create, and then the trademark is the source of the good. So you think about looking at a package that you receive and where the logo is placed, and that is your trademark. But your copyright is in the package that you get. That's the things you copyright. You copyright the things that you put in this box that you send to your customers. So that's a good way to kind of look at it.
Very clear. Very good. Thank you. Now, talking about foundational and getting guidance and experts, I think a lot of entrepreneurs get worried about getting a CPA. So when or should an entrepreneur get a CPA to work with them in their business?
Honestly, we've had a family CPA since I was young, like very young. I took on my first YMCA job, and when I took it, I didn't make enough money for us to have to file anything. But I believe you should have a CPA since the first time you make money or bring money in general, because right now you guys are experiencing this during the COVID stimulus plans and all the different money things that you can apply for. You don't know what you're doing, and you don't want to get defrauding of the government on your record, because if you defraud the government with your COVID-19, your stimulus, your PPP, any of that, you could be, facing some serious charges. So if you don't have a CPA or you didn't have one before, after watching this hot financial crisis during COVID, you should really consider getting one, because what they do is they help you organize all of the stuff that you say that you're doing. You need to organize it, and you need to do it monthly. You don't need to do it at the end of the year or right before tax season and give them a shoebox. You need to have it done, and you need to know how to do it. And CPAs know how to do it. And maybe, make CPA friends in your network so y'all can do it together every now and again. That's what I do. I have some CPA friends, and we have a long-term family CPA that does it for me. But I do the work in the process. I create the profit and loss statements for them so that they don't have to go through all of my receipts and add everything up. So you have to be able to know something. You do need to get a CPA. Some people say you can do it yourself, but I believe it's always good to have someone to check your work.
Exactly. I love it. So now let's think about, here's a business that you're working with to launch or grow. And depending on the kind of business, maybe there's some that is just consulting where you don't really need brick and mortar buildings or equipment, but sometimes a business will need funding. Talk a little bit about where an entrepreneur can find grants or funding or any kind of access to capital.
Well, one, there's a resource list for my VIP people in my program. But if you don't get that, there's tons of funding opportunities, but depending on what you need through the SBA, okay? So you need to first start where the government is involved, because they already have this stuff pre-built. Everybody else is just supplemental, right? These are grant programs that people come up with because they want to give out money to feel good, right? But the SBA has been providing this for a very long time. So if you didn't know about the SBA.gov or thought they were only relevant to COVID, they have been doing this for a long time. In Alabama specifically, but this company actually extends beyond Alabama, there's something called the Catalyst of Alabama. They help business owners find funding and get the infrastructure necessary. And right now, everything is free. And then, of course, there are pitch competitions and things like that where you can pitch your business for equity stake to other people. So if you're looking for business funding, that's where the business funding is. It's grants, it's pitch competitions, it's accelerator programs, it's things like that. But you have to be diligent. You have to sign up for those newsletter subscriptions to the I Fund Women or, her legacy, Walker's Legacy. Those companies put out newsletters full of grant listings. Terry Sewell, who is a congressperson here in Alabama, puts out a guide to grants letter that she sends out via email every month. You have to tune in to every single thing, go through them all, apply, get a good CPA or someone who's a great grant writer on your team, and apply to these things diligently. But the easiest way to start is for you to get yourself a DUNS number, get yourself a SAM.gov account, and get yourself on grants.gov and start applying, because that is federal funding, that's federal contracting and things like that. And if you have the services that the government requires, you can also secure government contracts. And again, I usually have this on my Neena Speer.podia.com with my business consultants, my financial people that I know how to do this process. But I want people to realize that DUNS numbers, all that stuff is free. You just have to know your NAICS code, which is an NAICS code. All you got to do is know what you do for business. And so a lot of people don't know these things. And I know these things because I took the time to go learn it. If I didn't know it, I go take the time to learn it. And a lot of us don't want to because it's too much work. That's why we pay people, because it's too much work.
Yeah. And I'll tell you that a lot of people don't realize that when you hear the word government contracting, you just think of, oh, well, I don't do highways and build bridges, so I can never get that. Mm-hmm. But one time I interviewed someone who worked for an agency. It was called PTAC, and it stands for like procurement and technical acquisition. But anyway, they work with entrepreneurs to help them get all those, set up for these government contracts. And they told me once that it would be very shocking to people to realize that you can get a government contract for some things that you would never believe. And they gave me a couple examples. They said that back when one of the wars was going on back in like the late 90s, the government contracted a local llama breeder to do this large government contract to train their soldiers how to work with the llamas, because they knew over in Afghanistan they would be working with llamas. Now, who in the world llama breeder would have thought to have gone and got a government contract? So if someone is understanding that sometimes just getting that fishing pole in the line, you can pick up on opportunities like that. And so tap into resources like Neena, because if you can guide them to get set up and get in those systems, maybe you get an opportunity for whatever your business is. That's a really big aha moment, I believe.
Yes, it really is.
So let's talk a little bit about, now that you've started working with some professionals to help you get hold of funding or grants or get your books set up the right way, what kind of business should be set up? We know that there's sole prop and LLC and corporation and C Corp and S Corp, all these choices, and it kind of makes your head spin. So what should an entrepreneur do?
So a lot of people, they start with that sole prop, right? The sole prop is the most risky of them all. Why? Because it's not really a business entity. And if you get sued and you messed up and you get damages, they can attack your personal finances, like your house, your car, your 401k, because a lot of people put the money that they get, and they have a sole prop, in their personal bank account. And so everything's up for grabs because you put everything and mix the money for everything. So a lot of people who run a sole prop don't ever create a private business bank account or anything like that. And even the ones who do, they still find a way to mix the money because it's a sole proprietorship and there's not really any type of formalized entity. Other people like to form what I call these informal partnerships, where they don't really have to do anything, not have to file anything. They're not really a business entity, but they got like an agreement in writing. And those partnership agreements, it always goes south because one person is majority liable and the other person is not. What I use for people to create is an LLC, but before we get there, the corporation has the most protection. Most people are not equipped to form a corporation, and here's why. Because the corporations require that they have rules in place, that they have schedules, that they have shareholder meetings, that they have shares, that they have regular meeting minutes, they have a certain number of people in some states that are required to be a part of them. And they have rules like bylaws written up, and they turn those in with the corporation. And funny enough, fun fact, a nonprofit is just a corporation. All the difference between a nonprofit and a corporation is that a nonprofit filed for 501c3 status because it was created for a charitable purpose. That's it. But a nonprofit is a corporation. So if you think you're going to run a nonprofit, all those things that I said to you are important and critical. And in Alabama, you have to have at least 3 people for your nonprofit to be able to start. And that's what a lot of people don't realize, is that corporations require you to have formalized structures and formalized meetings and everything. Most people are not willing to do that, and that's okay because they don't trust people, and rightly so, because, somebody makes the wrong business decision, you all go to jail. So I want people to form an LLC. An LLC allows them to be their sole owner. They don't have to have anybody else with them. They can be a sole member LLC, and you'll still be taxed like your sole prop until you get more members who are owning the LLC. But right now, that's not more important, because when you start making money, a lot of money, right, you can ask that your LLC be taxed as an S corporation. And what that does is that gives you the ability to apply for a reasonable salary deduction. So if you make $100,000 a year with your LLC, at that point, you know that you pay yourself something that's reasonable per month. You take that deduction out of your LLC business expenses, and then that's an added deduction of what's taxed. So it becomes less taxed income because you have a reasonable salary deduction. Now, of course, talk this over with a CPA. I don't know all the specifics of that because I have not made that bank enough to be able to get there. But I do know that taxing as an S corp is another way for you to achieve corporation status, and you can always convert your LLC to a corporation when you become bigger and more well organized. And so that's what a lot of people want to do, because they want to give out shares and things like that, and they bring in money that way through the shareholders and the stocks. And, I haven't gotten there because I don't want my company to be publicly traded yet, but maybe one day, and that's the thing. You have the opportunity to utilize different sources to fund your business, but tax benefits of LLCs and S corporations keep you from being double taxed. And nobody likes double taxation, okay? So if you don't want to be double taxed, that's why people create LLCs. That's why people create S corporations. They are protected and insulated. Corporations, of course, are the most, but there is no such thing as an S corporation. You're just an LLC taxed as an S corporation. So people do ask me that a lot, but it's just you're being taxed as an S corp. You're still going to file LLC when you apply for funding and things like that. So that's the one fun fact that I can add to that.
Neat. So now that you've figured out what type of entity you want to be, because you're working with the right people, CPA, attorney, let's talk a little bit about what type of operating agreements and bylaws, and even how many business bank accounts should you have. So from a broad perspective, what should an entrepreneur be prepared for in that realm?
So I tell all the people who LLCs or corporations I form, you need an operating agreement and bylaws. These are the rules of the organization if conflict were to occur. And a lot of people don't spend enough time here. And so what happens is if somebody does some crazy stuff in your business, you have no rules that cover what happens when that happens, and you basically have to vote on whether or not you want something bad to happen or whatever. But there are clear rules in place in an operating agreement that would prevent those things from happening to begin with. But a lot of people don't take the time to do it. They pull something offline that they found. It might not be relevant to their business. It more than likely doesn't cover all the things that they need covered. And a lot of times people go and they apply for a grant and they ask for these things and they don't have them because they didn't get one. They just got the business formed. And that's the biggest issue, because this federal grant funding, that's what they ask for. They ask for your operating agreements. They ask for your bylaws. They ask for those things to make sure you're a legitimate business. And so a lot of times people don't legitimize their business by having the proper form. The other thing that you might need, and I use this a lot, is an independent contractor agreement. The independent contractor agreement allows you to hire people, but also retain your copyright rights and your confidentiality in your business. And you want to be able to have that. Now, of course, when you hire an employee, there's an employee agreement. But right now, those are the two that most people start off with. As far as business bank accounts, you should definitely have a savings. If you can't afford to get a savings at the bank, you can get a Marcus account and have an online savings account, but you need to have a business savings account. You need to have a business operating account, and then you need to have a business trust account. If you're starting with the bare minimum, that's what you can do. Now, there is Profit First out there. You guys can read that book, but it states that you should have 6. Okay, and I usually do recommend that as you continue to grow because there are fees and different fines that that come with your business, and there's an expense account, all that, and it makes it easier to kind of figure out what account to take from when you need to take it, so that when you're adding everything up, here's your expenses, here's the amount of money that you brought in, and here is the amount of money that you use for your business expenses and supplies. And so you take from the accounts when you need them, and then you're just adding up the totals and then subtracting them from a bigger Excel spreadsheet. So that's why people create them separately, is so that when they go to add and subtract later, they just have to add from this bank account, subtract from this bank account and this one, and then they know their totals. That's why people create them separately, because it's easier than having to go add those and segregate all the funds into the proper places.
So that makes total sense, and it's just like anything. It's a step-by-step process. You might not start with 6, you start with 1 and grow from there. And you mentioned independent contractors. Talk a little bit about what kind of different contracts you may need for employees, and you might not start off with full-time employees. You might start off with independent contractors and move up from there.
Yes. So reason why, and they're called 1099-T contractors or 1099-T people, because they do not receive health benefits from the organization. Many times you're not going to be in a position when you first start to pay people what they deserve, right? Because they do deserve it for working so hard for you. You're not going to be able to pay them what they deserve in the health benefits equation. So what you do is you hire them on as a contractor. A contractor is not a representative of your company unless they're doing company business and things like that, and then you can get into some legal ramifications. But they just do private work. So whatever they do for your company, it falls on them if they do something that's outside the scope. The other thing is, with a contractor, you set the terms of whoever you're hiring. So you tell them what the terms are. They usually have a flat rate or an hourly rate. And when you have that contractor agreement in place, it's great. However, there are people like food businesses that have this top secret, food product, or this way that they do their food that nobody else should know. That's like a trade secret. In those cases, you get them to sign non-disclosure agreements, and you make that a part of their employment agreements. You also can create something where they have to have non-compete clauses and things like that, because you work in law firms, right? And then somebody comes and works for your law firm for a year and then steals all your clients. So you have to create things within your contracts, and the clauses are more important than multiple contracts, because you can have one contract that covers all of these via clause, and you can have one contract that covers each of these via contract. But I like to think of it as 3 contractors, super imperative. One is your independent contractor, one is your employment agreement, and then the others are your non-disclosure agreements and like long-term service. So I call them my general counsel agreement or your general retainer agreement, where basically people get to retain lots of hours or 10 hours or more of your service, and you put it in sort of a package. So this is when you do long-term service for people for a prolonged period of time as needed, contractor basis. And so those are really important documents, really important contracts to have, and it allows you to have some solid understanding in your business when you do business with people and they're like, oh, what does this term mean? Oh, this means X, Y, Z. But if you don't have those contracts in place, you won't know if you're hiring people who are legitimate or not, because I've had people say no based off the fact that I need them to sign an independent contractor agreement that grants me the full content rights and things like that. And when they won't sign that, then I realize that we can't do business because I want to own the content and they do too. And we can't have that. And so that's what a lot of people run into, is a lot of times when you're hiring people, they do not want to actually have you own the content. And that's not how I contract to do business, because I'm in IT. So nobody should have my content and be able to sell it and prevent me from selling it. But a lot of times that's what people do. When you sign those guest releases for those shows that you talk on, you got to read the fine print. They say that they can repackage your content and sell it. And that's not what you probably wanted them to do.
Excellent. So now let's throw another aspect into employees and contractors. What about kids? Can kids work, or how can kids best work for your organization? Could they be owners? Is there a benefit to bringing your kids into your organization? And then how do you pay them properly?
Yes. So this is something that you have to go to the family help section on the IRS website, and they have a very extensive section for each type of way to pay them, because the payment process gets a little tricky. Like if a parent that's employed by a child, they're not subject to the FUTA tax and things like that, but they get real particular on there. But with kids, this is the most important things about hiring your kids. It's not that you can't hire them, okay? You can hire your child, but just remember that you, child, can use your deduction for only $12,000 of your wages. That's usually what the installation is. So most people hire because they think you can, make deductions and things like that for your children. They can't necessarily be an owner, but every state has a rule for how ownership is recognized as legal and non-legal. There's nothing that prevents them from being an owner in your LLC or your company, but you have to figure out which one are legitimate members and which ones are non-legitimate members. And if you hire your kids, either part-time or full-time, there are certain tax cuts that you do get benefits from, but you have to go to the IRS website. There are a lot of things that you can Google, right? Because I can Google kid owners of LLC IRS, but the first thing you need to click is the one that says family health with the Internal Revenue Service, and that will show you what covered services are for the children, what you can do with your kids, and what you cannot do with your kids. And a lot of people don't do that, right? They go and find all these little articles that make it easy. The IRS lays it out very clearly how you can and cannot employ children, right? You can have payment to the service of a child that's under 18 who works for your parents, but you can't, have them working in your company if you're not working for your parents, because there are certain age restrictions on how you pay kids. And so a lot of people employ young kids, 5, 8, 10, whatever. You have to understand what the rules are for parents. So yes, your child can own your LLC, but there's nothing that allows them to make big financial decisions like signing contracts because they're not 18 years old. And contracts must be signed by someone who's 18 years or older. And so a lot of people don't know that, right? So they argue back and forth about, I can. Yes, you can, but there's always restrictions on whatever you do with kids, because kids are not actually able to legally contract for services. So your kids aren't necessarily able to run your business for you if they're under a certain age requirement.
And just like you mentioned, the IRS website has some wonderful resources. You still might need that guidance from that CPA to fine-tune it to your specific need. And what I would also say is an entrepreneur that is looking to start their business and all of these questions we've covered here, many times they might need that mentor and that guide. So what is the best way that someone can reach out and connect with Neena Speer and continue to learn about the journey to entrepreneurship?
All they need to do is tap.bio/@ CEO RANI or CEO Ronnie. That's all you have to do. You'll find all the information about the book, about me, about all the different ways that you can connect to us in the book. But I really do want you guys to start making business something that you care about and not just something you do to make money. Because if you don't care about your business, if you don't put time into it and educational components into your business, you won't grow. And you'll stay in the same level that you were the time before. So when people ask you hard questions, go research it. When you don't know the answer, go figure it out. And if you don't know something, it's okay to say you don't know, but say you'll go figure it out. And then come back to the same people who asked you those questions with the answer. That's how you can conduct good business. A lot of people don't do that simple thing. But when I follow up with people, if I don't know something, I will find you somebody who could. And that's the big part of business. You just have to be reliable enough that people feel like they can come to you. And even if you can't solve their problem, you'll work hard to find someone who can.
Well, Neena, it's been wonderful talking with you. These are some high-level things that you really made understandable. So thanks so much for coming on today.
Thanks, Mike.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.